Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the first portfolio is Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. And at question number 1, I call Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it supports music venues.
Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson.
The Scottish Government values the importance of the music industry to Scotland's culture. We have demonstrated our commitment to the culture sector with an increase of over £34 million in funding for 2025-26 and introducing new tax relief for hospitality premises which will benefit smaller music venues. I urge members of the Scottish Parliament of all parties to vote for the budget in February to ensure that this transformational funding for Scotland's culture sector is secured.
Murdo Fraser.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response? Notwithstanding what he says about the budget, there are very real concerns in the sector about the viability of music venues. The budget gives 40% rates relief, but unlike in England, this is capped at £51,000 of rateable value. That means 1/3 of venues who are associated with the Music Venue Trust are not eligible for support, including the likes of Nice and Sleazy in Glasgow, the Voodoo Rooms in Edinburgh, Hootenanny in Inverness. They are getting no support. So how is the Cabinet Secretary, looking at that budget, going to secure the future of those venues, which are the ones that are currently feeling the pinch?
Cabinet Secretary.
So the Scottish Government recognises the role that grassroots music venues play in supporting the talent pipeline. We will be introducing a 40% relief for mainland hospital premises, including grassroots music venues, with a capacity of up to 1,500, with a rateable value up to and including £51,000 and capped at £110,000 per business. Further detail will be set out in secondary legislation in due course. This relief will reduce overheads and support the wider cultural ecosystem and nighttime economy. But if Murdo Fraser has proposals that he has to widen, deepen and broaden support for the culture sector, I'll be happy to look closely at any proposals that he has.
Supplementary, Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As Murdo Fraser said, unlike England, Scottish Government rate relief proposals are limited to venues with rateable value of under £51,000. Music Venues Trust analysis shows 19 venues will miss out due to this cap, including the Voodoo Room in the Cabinet Secretary's own constituency, which will pay more than larger venues. Given soaring costs for grassroots music venues in recent years, would the Cabinet Secretary agree that furthermore targeted support is needed?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm all in favour of more targeted support, and as I think Faisal Chowdhury knows, that this government's proposals in the forthcoming budget are for the biggest ever increase in culture and arts sector funding outside COVID recovery. I'm open to looking at proposals for further and increased support beyond that. But to be honest, if members of the Scottish Parliament or opposition parties are wishing additional support for culture and the arts, the first thing they're going to have to do is actually vote for it in the budget.
Question number 2, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it is supporting independent cinemas.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government recognises the value of independent cinemas to our communities, and we continue to work closely with Screen Scotland and partners to support their development for Scotland's audiences today and in the long term. Screen Scotland's strategy and funding, which will increase by £2 million in 25-26, supports inclusive and sustainable growth of our screen sector, with a focus on ensuring wide access to cinema and a diverse range of screen content. This includes support for cultural cinema venues, organisations, touring programmes, independent film exhibitors and the distribution of Scottish titles across Scotland.
Audrey Nicholl.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, and indeed since 2023 the Scottish Government, through Screen Scotland, has supported the campaign to reopen the Belmont Cinema in Aberdeen through the distribution of operational expenditure, allowing the charity Belmont Community Cinema Limited to hire several staff working tirelessly to reopen this iconic venue in the Granite City. So can the Cabinet Secretary provide further detail as to any funding within the proposed Scottish budget which could help ensure the reopening of this cornerstone of Aberdeen's cultural ecosystem?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I very much recognise the huge value that the Belmont and cultural cinema as a whole bring to Scotland's creative landscape. Cinemas like the Belmont are a vital source of cultural experience, community connection, learning and well-being, and since its closure in 2022, Screen Scotland has provided £320,000 in funding to support the reopening of the Belmont Cinema. The budget for 25-26 includes a further £20 million for Creative Scotland for their multi-year funding programme, and this will enable Creative Scotland to roll out its multi-year funding programme, ensuring that the highest ever number of artists and organisations receive regular funding, and the Scottish Government will also continue to liaise with Screen Scotland to explore all viable options to deliver sustainable cultural cinema for our communities right across Scotland.
Supplementary, Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A reopened Belmont would be transformational for Aberdeen and the North East, and so it's disappointing to hear that no capital support figure was talked about in that answer from the Cabinet Secretary, given that this government has, commendably I might add, made multi-millions available for similar projects in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Will the Cabinet Secretary meet with representatives of Belmont Community Cinema Limited, including the new CEO, prior to the budget, to hopefully agree to send capital funding north of the Central Belt?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, can I point out I've already met with the Belmont Cinema and will always be happy to meet with them about any particular ask. But I have to say, what I think would be most disappointing, to be frank, is if MSPs were to abstain or to vote against the biggest ever support for culture and arts in Scotland. It's one thing wishing the outcomes without supporting the means. So whether Conservative or Labour colleagues want to turn in, week out, month after month, saying they support culture, they should actually vote for it.
Supplementary, Neil Bibby.
Thank you. Thank you, Presiding Officer. Many areas in Scotland don't have access to any cinemas at all and rely on the Screen Machine to experience film. The Scottish Government have previously stated they would consider all options for purchasing a new Screen Machine because the current one is leased and unsuitable for all locations. In light of the record funding settlement for the Scottish Government by the new UK Labour Government and the fact that the two previous Screen Machines were procured by the previous Labour Liberal Democrat Scottish Government, what support is the Scottish Government proposing to provide in order to purchase a new Screen Machine?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Neil Bibby knows, the Scottish Government budget proposes an increase in support for Screen Scotland, which is Scotland's national agency dealing with film and television. He'll also be aware of the commitment by the Scottish Government to support the availability of cinema to communities, and Screen Machine has played a leading part in all of that. But as I would gently say to colleagues from opposition parties, there is absolutely zero credibility turning up into this chamber saying one wishes to see more things spent on culture and the arts, but apparently are going to abstain when it actually comes before this chamber.
And supplementary, Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I thank the Minister for his encouraging words in support of the work of Belmont Community Cinema Limited, and can I add Labour's support for this endeavour. But can I also ask the Minister to outline exactly how much funding there is going to be allocated to the reopening of the Belmont Cinema? I hear that he's talking about additional funding going to the culture budgets and £2 million set aside to Screen Scotland, but is he able to give a figure that the Government will provide to support the Belmont Cinema? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary. Well, it's the first time hearing that we're going to have Labour support for the budget, which I very much welcome and look forward to the member voting for the increase in culture and the arts when it comes before this chamber. I'll be content to write to her and to other colleagues who have been asking specifically about the Belmont. As she probably knows, I lived in Aberdeen for some time, was happy to support the Belmont and would look forward to it succeeding in the future. I've already met with the team that are running the cinema and will look at every way in which we can possibly support it.
Question number 3, Emma Roddick, who's joining us online. Ms Roddick.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on its assessment of the potential impact of the UK Government's decision to increase employer national insurance contributions on the culture sector.
Cabinet Secretary.
The First Minister and the President of the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities wrote to the Chancellor on the 3rd of January, supported by 48 public and voluntary sector organisations, to raise concerns about the impact of the increase to employer national insurance contributions and to seek clarity on funding. The estimated impact of the UK Government's decision on the 5 culture public bodies is as follows: £1.046 million for the 3 national collections, £1.7 £0.7 million for Historic Environment Scotland and £1.5 million for Creative Scotland. Early estimates suggest an additional liability of £250,000 for the National Records of Scotland core staffing costs.
Emma Roddick.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. I know that many culture organisations in the Highlands, like Eden Court, warmly welcome the £34 million suggested increase to culture spending. But I also heard concerns that these organisations are going to have little choice but to spend the bulk of that additional funding on mitigating the impact of Labour's national insurance changes. For Eden Court, the impact is estimated to be about £100,000 a year. So in light of this, can I ask him what consideration he's giving to ensuring that culture organisations in Scotland, including all those waiting for grant decisions from Creative Scotland later this month, can still make the most of that increased funding from the Scottish Government to create and innovate?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, Emma Roddick makes a good point that whilst this government is committed to increasing a further £34 million for culture, which will be transformational for the sector, the UK Labour government is undermining this good work with their plans for increased national insurance contribution costs. This will impact on increased NI contributions on cultural venues, including Eden Court, and may erode the benefits of this significant increase to culture funding. And that's why the First Minister and the President of COSLA wrote to the Chancellor on the 3rd of January, supported by 48 public and voluntary sector organisations, to raise concerns at the impact of the increase to employer national insurance contributions and to seek clarity on funding. Hopefully, we will have a positive response.
Question number 4, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to grow Scotland's arts, culture and creative sectors.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government has committed a further £34 million to the culture sector next financial year. This will result in the biggest increase in culture funding in the history of this Parliament after COVID recovery support, and takes the total uplift to date to £50 million. This is a huge vote of confidence in our culture sector and will help to protect this treasured sector and the impact it makes on people's lives, and hopefully Daniel Johnson will vote for that.
Daniel Johnson.
The Cabinet Secretary might have seen on the BBC's website there's an article that's been published in the last couple of days titled "How Did Scotland Become a Hollywood Hotspot?" The point being is that culture isn't just about spend. It can be big business with big investments and big sums of money being spent in Scotland. So the discussions I have had with the creative sector is not just about the quantum, but actually the structure of funding. So what I would like to ask the Cabinet Secretary is what discussions has he had with Scottish Enterprise, South of Scotland Enterprise and Highlands Enterprise, along with Scottish National Investment Bank, about how culture spending can be implemented in such a way that is compatible with wider enterprise and investment strategies across the public policy areas.
Cabinet Secretary.
I think that's a very thoughtful question from Daniel Johnson, and I think the points that he raises are ones which no doubt will be reflected in the forthcoming review into the operation of Creative Scotland, because he's right to point out that it is not just the main vehicle of public funding support for creative and artistic organisations. We have national performing companies, we have national organisations, galleries, libraries, museums and such like. And the structure of funding is something that needs to be thought about right across the piece. That does involve the likes of our enterprise agencies as well. And if he has any specific suggestions, I would be very keen to see them, and no doubt the incoming chair of the review will also be very interested in seeing that.
And supplementary, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's very difficult for the arts, culture and creative sector to continue to thrive, Cabinet Secretary, when councils across Scotland are proposing devastating cuts which will decimate the funding of music services and affect the sector's future. So what action is the Scottish Government taking to negate these ill-conceived proposals, which will see possibly the removal of 60 years of instrumental and vocal teaching disappear within our communities?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as Alexander Stewart knows, I'm a great supporter of music teaching in schools, and I would be greatly concerned if there was any a diminution of that, because this government has a good record of supporting teaching right across Scotland. I'll be content to write to him to give him some more detail on all of that. The forthcoming budget provides for additional resources to local government and provides for record funding for culture and the arts. And if Mr Stewart is keen for local government to have the means, and if he is keen for the sector to have the means, then I hope he'll be voting for that in the budget and not just raising questions. He actually has a vote. He can influence things. I hope he will vote for the budget.
Question number 5, Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the progress to restore the Mackintosh building of the Glasgow School of Art.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Mackintosh building is owned by the Glasgow School of Art with responsibility for its own strategic and operational decision-making. The Scottish Government understands that work is in progress by external architects on the Mackintosh building project. According to the Glasgow School of Art, this work aims to ensure that delivery of the Mackintosh project continues to be evidence-based and that the building is successfully rebuilt as a working school of art in support of the regeneration of Sauchiehall Street and Glasgow City Centre. Proposals are expected to be completed and published early this year. The Scottish Government and Scottish Funding Council will continue to engage closely with the Glasgow School of Art as it progresses its plans for the Mackintosh building.
Paul Sweeney.
I'm sure the Cabinet Secretary would share with me the admiration of the achievement of the French people in the successful restoration of Notre Dame de Paris last month. After a little over 5 years, more than 7 years on, we still have very little progress on the restoration of Glasgow School of Art, Scotland's greatest ever architectural achievement. In the 850th anniversary of Glasgow's Borough Charter being granted this year, will the Cabinet Secretary agree to convene a cross-government and cross-architectural sector in Scotland summit to bring together a special purpose vehicle or special sponsor body to take forward the Glasgow School of Art restoration project, because currently it is stymied by the ongoing litigation and dispute with the insurers and the Glasgow School of Art, and it's simply too big a project and too complex a project to be left to the Glasgow School of Art alone. It is a national project and should be treated as such.
Cabinet Secretary.
What can I say? I do share the admiration that Paul Sweeney has raised in the Chamber about the restoration of Notre Dame in Paris and the speed with which that was completed. And I think the people of France can be very proud, the people of Paris can be very proud of that restoration project. As I've already outlined, proposals are expected to be completed and published early this year, and I will be content to convene a meeting to discuss what emerges from that, because further unnecessary delays is not something that I know he wants to see, and it's not something that I want to see, and the speediest restoration that we could see possible is something that I am very supportive of.
Question number 6, Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how its draft budget will support the arts and culture sector in 2025-26, including through the provision of multi-year funding programmes for artists and cultural organisations.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, through this budget, we will provide an increase of £20 million for Creative Scotland's multi-year funding programme, as well as further increases for the national collections and also for the national performing companies. In addition, we will ring-fence new funding to support festivals across Scotland, to improve digital access to our public libraries, to restart and extend community-led arts and creativity programmes, and develop a culture and heritage capacity fund. We will also carry out a review of how the culture sector is supported, including a review of Creative Scotland, to ensure that government funding achieves the greatest possible impact.
Colette Stevenson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. In East Kilbride, there are many talented individuals and groups, some of whom have raised concerns with me that funding application processes can inadvertently exclude some artists due to the complexities of the process. What considerations have been given to harnessing creativity by improving access to funding for groups who consider themselves excluded or disadvantaged by what they consider a complex application process?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I appreciate, and I suspect MSPs right across this chamber appreciate the importance of the Creative Scotland multi-year funding process. And I look forward to them announcing the outcome of this process later this month. I have heard concerns about the complex nature of the application process, and I would expect that this would form part of the review of Creative Scotland, which was announced in the programme for government in September. We will be launching a survey next week, which will help inform the scope of both the review of Creative Scotland and also the wider work on how the culture sector is supported. So if Colette Stevenson or other colleagues right across the chamber have feedback from within the culture and arts community about the application processes or any other reflections on Creative Scotland going forward, I would encourage them all to take part in the forthcoming review.
Question number 7, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on Scotland's alignment with the EU, including in relation to the digital single market.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government laid its latest comprehensive reports on its policy of alignment with the European Union on the 31st of October, and I provided evidence to the CIAC Committee on this on the 21st of November. These detailed that Scotland is continuing to align with the European Union where possible and meaningful in protecting and advancing high standards, and set out our priorities for working with the EU across the full range of devolved policy areas, including in relation to the digital economy.
Willie Coffey.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? It's now nearly 5 years since the UK formally removed itself and Scotland from the European Union, and therefore also from the EU's digital single market, estimated to be worth over €400 billion per year. How can Scotland make sure, in the absence of any credible UK alternative, that we keep pace with and benefit from the EU's approach to digital services and innovation, so that Scotland can reap the economic rewards of closer involvement with the EU's direction of travel on digital matters in particular?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, missing the opportunities of access to the digital single market is just another example of the damage caused by a Brexit that Scotland didn't vote for. The European Parliament estimates that the potential gains of a digital single market could be in the region of €500 billion per year, which would translate into potentially billions of pounds for our economy. Our digital strategy here in Scotland, published in 2021, highlights the need for a strong digital economy to help all businesses become digital businesses in Scotland's pursuit of becoming a vibrant, inclusive, outward-looking digital nation.
And question number 8, Rachel Hamilton.
To ask the Scottish Government what support it can provide to those who wish to protect and preserve the Bernard Climate Studio in Selkirk.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government delivers support for the historic environment through sponsorship of Historic Environment Scotland, the lead public body for the protection and preservation of historic sites in Scotland. The Bernard Klein Studio in Selkirk is in private ownership, and as such, responsibility for the care and maintenance of the property lies with its owner. However, it is worth noting that Historic Environment Scotland delivers around £14 million of grant funding each year to individuals, to groups and to organisations for projects benefiting the historic environment, and information on how to apply for that can be found on its website.
Rachel Hamilton.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Presiding Officer, the Bernard Klein Studio near Selkirk was designed by one of Scotland's greatest modernist architects, Wormsley, and has been described as a beacon for progressiveness for the borders. Despite being on the buildings at risk register since 2002, has now fallen into dereliction and disrepair, looking very sad and unloved. Does the Minister recognise the value in preserving culturally significant buildings? And would the Minister be prepared to meet with local groups, the Wormsley Preservation Group, Scottish Environment, Scotland, and those who wish to save the building, who want to use it as a hub for the local community?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, may I commend Rachel Hamilton for standing up for a beacon of progressiveness in the borders and drawing attention to the Bernard Klein Studio and its architectural, its cultural and its historical importance. It's absolutely right to note that it is the most celebrated work of Peter Wormsley and the workplace of the world-class textile designer Bernard Klein. I will look very closely at any proposals that are made to protect and preserve the Bernard Klein Studio, and I'll be happy to do that together with Rachel Hamilton.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on Constitution, External Affairs and Culture and Parliamentary Business. There will be a short pause before we move on to the next portfolio to enable frontbench teams to change position should they so wish. Thank you. Okay, so the next portfolio this afternoon is Justice and Home Affairs. I would ask members to be succinct with their questioning and ministers in their responding, in order to allow as many members as possible to have an opportunity. Question number 1, Mark Griffin, is not here. Therefore, I now call question number 2, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has been made aware of the identity of the police officers investigating Operation Branchform, and if so, when?
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, this matter is subject to an ongoing police investigation, and as such it would not be appropriate to comment.
Craig Hoy.
I thank the Minister for that non-answer. While the Crown Office determines whether to prosecute Peter Murrell and the police decide whether to charge Nicola Sturgeon, the public continue to scratch their head in disbelief at the 1,273 days spent so far on Operation Branchform. We now know that 11 officers are engaged in the ongoing investigation. Separately, a Freedom of Information request recently asked the Scottish Government if and when they found out the identities of the investigating officers and how they came to be made aware of those details. The request also asked what procedures were in place to ensure that meetings with these officers did not occur by accident. In response, the Government said giving answers would, and I quote, substantially prejudice the investigation, which strongly suggests the Government may well be aware of those facts. So can the Minister explain why revealing the specific date when officers' identities could have become known would risk prejudicing the police probe? And if the Government has nothing to hide, why would it not confirm how it may have secured the identities of the investigating officers, if indeed it is in receipt of them?
Before I ask the Cabinet Secretary to respond, I would of course remind all members that there is a live investigation here, and therefore matters are subject to the provisions of the Contempt of Court Act, and obviously members across the Chamber should be careful and exercise due caution in what they say. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, with respect to both yourself and Chamber, as the member is well aware as Justice Secretary, I do not comment and I am not involved in live cases, and I have nothing further to add.
We will move on to question number 3, as no member sought to ask a supplementary on that one. And number 3, Claire Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what support is available to the Office of Public Guardian for the people accessing Scottish courts and tribunal services.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Office of the Public Guardian plays a key role in promoting awareness and understanding of the legal frameworks designed to protect adults with incapacity. While it does not provide direct court access, its supportive and regulatory functions are key to maintain trust and efficiency within the broader Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service framework. Individuals seeking support to access the courts can contact their local Citizens Advice Bureau, law centres, solicitors or third sector organisations specialising in legal aid and advocacy services.
Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to highlight a constituent case. A family who applied for a guardianship order in 2014 for their adult son and was granted a 3-year award. On renewal, however, in 2022, the court refused the extension as the reports provided by other agencies were out of date by the time of the court appearance, and the family have been in a circle of trying to get legal aid re-established and to access the courts again. So can I ask the Minister to provide an update on the timeframe for the legislative reforms to the Adults with Incapacity Scotland Act and what steps it can take to ensure that agencies meet, including the courts, meet the timescales involved? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, a bill to update and modernise the Adults with Incapacity Act is expected to be introduced during the 24-25 parliamentary year. Consultation on proposed amendments ran between July and October 2024, with analysis of the responses due to be published later this month. I am sorry to hear of the delays experienced by Ms Adamson's constituent and family. If she would like to provide further details to my office, I would be very happy to look into this for her. Delays to court hearings with respect to guardianship applications is not an issue that has been raised with me previously or with my officials. The member will be aware that the scheduling of court business is for the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service, and with support from the Scottish Government and our investment in resources, we have succeeded in reducing significantly the backlog in criminal courts. However, this issue in relation to the civil case that the member refers to has not previously been raised with me, but I'd be delighted to look at it.
Question number 4, Hamza Youssef, who's joining us remotely. Mr Youssef.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with the UK Government in relation to lifting Crown immunity under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 for the Scottish Prison Service.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government has not had an occasion to discuss this matter with the UK Government since the new administration was formed. I am due to write to the Secretary of State for Justice this month to schedule a bilateral meeting, and this will be one of several agenda items I intend to set out for discussion. Crown immunity remains a reserved matter for the UK Government, so it is difficult for me to comment further until I have had further discussions with the UK Government.
Hamza Youssef.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response and say that I'm very pleased to hear that she is writing to the her UK counterpart to seek a meeting and proposing that this issue be on the agenda. Let me from the outset acknowledge the incredibly difficult job that prison officers do right up and down the country, and the overwhelming majority, of course, do that job well. However, in any organisation, there will be individual and institutional failures, on occasion with devastating impact. Last year, I wrote to the then Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, asking that he give serious consideration to lifting Crown immunity for the Scottish Prison Service for breaches of the Health and Safety at Work Act. I wasn't given a courtesy of a response. Therefore, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that during her meeting she will urge the UK Government to seriously consider lifting Crown immunity so that we can ensure that if there are criminal failures in the prison service, then those responsible are able to be held to account and not be protected by Crown immunity?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me start by also acknowledging the role of prison officers. They undertake a difficult and challenging job to both protect the public and care for people who are quite often vulnerable. As I mentioned in my answer, I am due to write to the Secretary of State for Justice this month to schedule a bilateral meeting. I know that this issue remains an important matter for Mr Youssef and others, and it will be one of the items I intend to raise during this meeting. As Mr Youssef will be aware, the issue of Crown immunity is not limited to the Scottish Prison Service and is actually applicable to all Crown bodies right across the UK, and it will therefore require a broader discussion with the UK Government.
I call question number 5, Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when it last met the Chief Constable of Police Scotland and what issues were discussed.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, my most recent meeting with the Chief Constable was on the 19th of December 2024, where we discussed Police Scotland's 3-year business plan with notable progress across a number of areas, including body-worn video, the police budget, which I am pleased to report was welcomed by the Chief Constable, who stated that it would allow Police Scotland to continue to deliver against their 3-year plan and police officer and staff pay. I'm also pleased to inform the Chamber that agreement has now been reached in respect of police staff pay award.
Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I welcome that positive news. When the Cabinet Secretary next meets the Chief Constable, they wish to indicate that there are MSPs in this place, such as myself, that wish to see greater support for Police Scotland in policing the dangerous misuse and often illegal use of off-road vehicles and e-bikes. I would note that myself and Councillor Gow have an upcoming meeting with the Scottish Government, Police Scotland and COSLA on related issues, given our public safety concerns. However, given that many e-bikes, scooters and quad bikes will have been purchased as gifts at Christmas and more generally become increasingly common right across our communities. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that promoting the responsible and legal use of such vehicles with related public awareness and education campaigns is worthy of consideration?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the points that Mr Doris makes are very apposite and well made indeed, and particularly in response to the festive period. Can I assure him and other members that the Scottish Government will continue to fully support Police Scotland and other relevant partners in dealing with the misuse of these vehicles? Before Christmas, Police Scotland issued public communications via their website, reminding people to consider the legal implications when purchasing an electric scooter or e-bike. Their message urged people to be cautious when buying electric bikes or e-scooters, reminding the public that some models may not be permitted for use on public roads, and that anyone found riding a non-compliant e-bike or e-scooter on a public road will likely have it seized by officers with a significant cost to the owner. And I'm also aware that the Minister Siobhan Brown and Minister Jim Fairley, along with Police Scotland, will indeed be meeting with Mr Doris, who has been pursuing this issue diligently, along with other MSP colleagues.
And supplementary, Mercedes Vialba.
Thank you. 5 young activists are currently serving sentences in Scottish prisons for taking part in a non-violent Palestine solidarity protest at the Thales weapons factory in Glasgow. It's rare for activists to be imprisoned in Scotland, and a different policing approach does seem to have been taken to protests at the Leonardo weapons factory in Edinburgh. So can I ask the Minister what discussions the Scottish Government has had with the Chief Constable of Police Scotland regarding the policing of protests at weapons factories, and on any apparent discrepancies in approach? And does the Minister recognise the right to protest and its importance in a democratic society?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, firstly let me say that I cannot and will not comment on the the independent decisions made on sentencing by our independent courts. But let me reassure the member that I regularly discuss issues in and around the policing of protests with the Chief Constable and other police partners. We do indeed preserve and respect the right to peaceful protest, and the approach that Police Scotland successfully undertakes is to engage, to educate and to encourage, and they will pursue all of those measures prior to any enforcement action that is necessary. And I'm very proud that Police Scotland works diligently day in, day out to build very constructive relationships with all our communities, and that includes people who are exercising their right to peaceful protest.
Question number 6, Katie Clark.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it is giving consideration to a pilot scheme on independent legal representation for rape victims.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, this Parliament is aware that I am committed to improving the experience of victims of sexual offences in their interaction with our justice system, and that lies at the very heart of the provisions in the Victims' Witness and Justice Reform Bill. The bill will enable publicly funded independent legal representation for complainers when applications to lead evidence of their sexual history and/or their character are made in sexual offence cases. The bill does not currently include a power for ministers to go beyond this. However, I am aware of Ms Clark's amendment to the bill, which I will of course carefully consider and will be seeking to meet to discuss directly with her.
Katie Clark.
I'm very grateful to the Cabinet Secretary for her offer to meet. As she knows, many rape victims describe their experience of the justice system as re-traumatising, intimidating and disempowering. And over recent decades, many other countries have introduced far greater advice and representation to victims, including rape victims. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree with organisations such as Rape Crisis Scotland that there is a strong case for a further extension of legal advice to victims of rape to empower those survivors?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, can I start by saying that complainers and victims having fundamental trust and confidence in their system is crucial to them coming forward and seeking justice. And I very much recognise her commentary around the re-traumatisation that many victims have so powerfully gave personal testimony to, particularly in representations made to the Criminal Justice Committee. I very much welcomed the committee's conclusion at the end of the Stage 1 report that independent legal representation should not be extended beyond the Section 275 applications. And the rationale was that by focusing ILR to Section 275 applications, this would provide a base for evaluation of its effectiveness, its use, its costs, and whether further reform is required. That is not to say that we cannot look at the further application of ILR at a later point and where evidence would support that approach. However, notwithstanding that, I am more than happy to be discussing with Ms Clark and other members the shape of the bill overall and in the round, because how it hangs together as an overall package is of crucial importance. So I will, in fairness and in the spirit of cooperation, have specific discussions with her over this specific amendment.
Question number 7, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to reduce the reoffending rate.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we know that community-based interventions can be more effective in reducing reoffending and assisting with rehabilitation than short-term custodial sentences, leading to fewer victims and safer communities. This is why we are focused on shifting the balance from custody to justice in the community and plan to invest around £159 million in community justice services in 2025-26 to support this. This includes an additional £11 million and takes our total new investment over 2 years to £25 million, supporting a range of community justice services, including diversion from prosecution, alternatives to remand, community sentencing and through care services.
Richard Leonard.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? It was Angela Davis who said, prisons do not disappear social problems, they disappear human beings. But it is worse. Prisons, for most people sent there, are not correctional. They have the opposite effect. Not only do they cost 20 times more than community sentencing, the reconviction rate is double. For all but the more serious crimes, prison doesn't make society safer at all. It manufactures criminality. So why do we continue to have one of the biggest prison populations in the whole of Western Europe? And why is the Scottish Government planning to cut the core budget for Community Justice Scotland in the next financial year?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I have a great respect and synergy for the overall tone and tenor of Mr Leonard's question. I know he is a powerful advocate for social justice and reform, and he is right to say that that prison should be used for those who present the greatest risk to members of the public, and that our prisons should also have a crucial role to reintegrate and rehabilitate. Why does Scotland have one of the biggest prison populations in Western Europe? I'm not sure I could answer that question in 30 seconds, but it gets to the fundamental core of the issue. And in all my endeavours over the past year or so to, yes, reduce the prison population, I am on record as saying time and time again our prison population is too high. We need to answer at a very fundamental level why we have one of the highest prison populations in the Western world when we are one of the safest countries in Western Europe and indeed in the world. And what I want to do in all of my endeavours is shift from, I suppose, more emotive and knee-jerk reactions to reactions and interventions that first and foremost are based on evidence about what works. And it's what works to keep our communities safer. Community justice is key to that, and I'm very pleased that this former social worker continues to increase investment in community justice.
Supplementary, Sharon Dowie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last summer, 12% of prisoners who were freed as part of the SNP's early release scheme ended up reoffending, with some breaking the law within hours of being released. With another wave of early releases expected in February, victims of crime will be concerned that we may see high rates of reoffending again. So what is the Scottish Government doing to improve public confidence that when someone does reoffend, their criminal actions will actually have consequences?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, public have confidence when our criminal justice interventions protect the public, yes, punish, but also succeed in reintegrating and rehabilitating prisoners and those who come into contact with the Justice Service. We know that people are concerned about reoffending rates, but when we look at the reoffending rates in comparison to those who receive a short custodial sentence with community justice has better outcomes and lower reconviction rates. So it's not just the right thing to do to shift that balance to community justice, it's also the smart thing to do and the safer thing to do for our communities.
And supplementary, Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary expand on how investment in community justice services contained within the proposed Scottish Budget will continue the Scottish Government's shift to the use of more community-based sentences and help reduce reoffending? Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the 2025-26 budget has a further £11 million increase in the community justice overall budget. That builds on the £14 million of additional funding that was committed for this financial year, and as I said earlier, bringing our total budget to £159 million. And this investment will support justice social work services across Scotland to build capacity and deliver a range of community justice services, including, crucially, those alternatives to remand and community services. And this uplift demonstrates our commitment to shifting the balance from custody to justice in the community and follows the evidence in terms of what works to reduce reoffending. And one of the examples of progress that has been made is that bail supervision cases are at the highest level in the last decade, and electronic monitoring has increased by 51% to 1,140 as a condition of bail orders imposed across Scotland in 23-24.
Question number 8, Jeremy Balfour.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and a Happy New Year to yourself. To ask the Scottish Government whether it has conducted an assessment of a potential impact of a reported proposed budget reduction for the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service on its ability to reduce any court backlogs.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Scottish Courts and Tribunal budget is subject to adjustment each year, and direct comparison with published figures does not provide a true reflection of the position. The 2025-26 allocation to the Scottish Courts and Tribunal system is £177 million. In addition, they receive recovery, renewal and transformation funding of £20.3 million and will be subject to adjustment in year. This provides a minimum of £197.3 million, which is an increase compared to 23-24 and the 24-25 figures.
Chairman Balfour.
Cabinet Secretary, during the pandemic, the closure of courts meant a large backlog of cases built up, including the most serious crimes. Back in March 2021, the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service forecast that this backlog for most serious crimes will be cleared by March of this year, in just 2 months' time. However, these forecasts have now been revisited and setting out a much less ambitious goal. Given that the Scottish Government's budget appears to show a cut in the cash settlement for a court service, can the Cabinet Secretary confirm that any hopes of meeting the court service original targets for clearing trial backlogs is over and people will have to wait longer for justice?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, let me reiterate that funding to the Scottish Courts and Tribunal system has not been cut, and I've outlined the figures in my previous answer to Mr Balfour. And it's really important that this crucial information is not misunderstood or misrepresented. We do know that demand on our court system, in particular the High Court, is increasing due to the successful actions of the Crown Office and prosecutors. We have always, as the court and tribunal system has been very transparent around the scheduling or any revising of planned timescales. But I am pleased to say, as a result of recovery funding that has been allocated to tackle backlogs, that significant progress has been made in reducing these. And in fact, the number of scheduled trials outstanding has fallen by over 50% since January 2022.
And supplementary, Kenneth Gibson.
Officer, today Jeremy Balfour seeks additional resources for the courts. In the last debate before Christmas, Pam Gosal sought more money to fix potholes. Last week, Murdo Fraser demanded more electric vehicle charging points. Given that none of these uncosted suggestions were even mentioned in December's Tory budget debate, and on Monday Russell Finlay again called for tax cuts, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that the Tories have not a shred of credibility when it comes to Scotland's finances?
Cabinet Secretary for matters within your portfolio responsibility, please. Thank you.
Yes, of course, Presiding Officer. I suppose what is relevant to the Justice portfolio is that the First Minister has continued to emphasise that he wants to maximise agreement with all parties. And of course, there always needs to be a sharp check with reality as to what resources are available and indeed and to what our powers are available in this Parliament. However, I am very pleased that for the second year we have increased the Justice budget, and if passed, the budget will mean an investment of almost £4.2 billion, and that's an increase of £398 million. And this increased budget will support the provision of high-quality public services, including police, fire, courts and prisons, continuing to keep our communities safe.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on Justice and Home Affairs, and there will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow members to change position, should they wish. Thank you.